Hey, hello friends. Thank you for joining me today. My name's Dan, and this is Daily Art Adventure number 619. I've been doing these since January 1st of 2017, so 2 years and 5 months. There we go. Thank you for joining me today. Let's get right to work. So I am doing a portrait of lovely Harper Ray. Here's the photograph. Let's see if you can get the whole view pretty close. There you go. There's the photograph. Here's the painting so far. And I'm sorry I did a whole bunch of work without you in the background here, but I will tell you what I did real quickly. The first thing I did is took a big brush with just pure water, and I very carefully wetted the whole paper, except of course her. So I just went around the edge real carefully. So all of this is wet. And then I dropped in large areas of green, again with this brush, mostly a little tiny bit with a 1-inch brush, but mostly the 2-inch. Then I did one thing particularly fun. I made a copy of my image that I'm going by and cut it out with an X-Acto knife. So that gave me a template, otherwise pronounced template. Put this here and then sprayed it. Well, of course, I'm not going to do it now. But psst, 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 psst. Do you like the sound effects? I'll do it again. Psst, 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 psst. There you go. And you can certainly see the effect of that here. So just trying to achieve a variety. Then I did just a little bit of painting. I did some lifting out here, again with a magic eraser and a spackling blade. Just an assortment of tricks. And then down here in the very bottom, did plain old-fashioned, no tricks, just painting with a brush. All right, so I'm very close to finished. Oh, I also touched up her face a little bit. Tiny bit. So small you guys wouldn't even be able to see it. So I didn't bother broadcasting that part. Now, I'll show you a little bit of touch up. In the course of doing some of that painting, pretty typical stuff here. I got a tiny drop of green paint right here. Can you see it? Tell you what, I'll get you as close as I can. Let's see how we can do. There we go, it's right there. Am I on camera? I am. All right, so I've got an X-Acto knife and I'm wearing 2 pairs of glasses again. And I'm just gonna scratch that real carefully. Whoops, I left my door open. We hear the young natives are restless out there, so forgive me for the sounds of family. Okay, I think that's going to do. I don't think I'm going to try to paint a flesh tone over that. I think that's with just my regular glasses on, I really can't see that. So several little things I want to show you as we finish up this painting. Okay, whoops! I just about dropped a damp brush onto my painting. That would not be good. All right, I'm mixing up over here some medium, dull, not too bright paint. And you see the photograph here where we're looking through one layer of her veil, so we get a lot of green coming through. I like that. So I want to do that right here. So for some reason at this point during my broadcast, I completely lost sound. So I am republishing this video with a voiceover. While I started doing some green watercolor in that part of her veil, I discovered that the watercolor started bleeding because it bumped up against an area where I had previously done some scratching with an X-Acto knife. That's why it's always a good idea to save any scratching till the very, very, very end of the process. But that's a problem area that I'm going to have to show you later how to fix. I began to experience the same kind of bleeding when I was painting right up against her right cheek, right here. I had done some scratching there earlier, so as soon as the fresh watercolor hits any area that's been scratched, it acts just like a sponge and soaks it right up. And again, in a few minutes I'll show you how I repair those little bits. So in order to start repairing these little bits of fuzziness that have come up, I first of all have to really make sure that the paper is dry. So I took the hair dryer and dried all that paint that I just put down a few minutes ago. So even though the video is just a little bit out of focus right here, I'm going to zoom in and talk about how to clean up this little bit right beside your cheek. Can you see where the green has bled in? First of all, here's a tip. Buy your X-Acto knives in boxes of 100. Don't buy a dozen of them, because if you do, you're too reluctant to change them frequently enough. You want an absolutely sharp blade whenever you're doing something very delicate like this. So I begin by scratching just very, very, very gently, very lightly, just enough to try to get rid of that green bleed that happened a few minutes ago. This is not extremely thick paper. It's 140 pounds, so you have to be careful that you don't create a great big canyon in the paper. So that was step one. Step two, get some very clean 320 grit sandpaper. Pretty fine stuff. You don't want real scratchy stuff, and it has to be clean. I'm folding it in half, as you can see. Not creasing it terribly tightly, just let that fold be a tiny bit rounded, because I'm going to use actually the folded curve of the sandpaper, if that makes sense to you, right where it folds in half. I didn't squeeze it real tight, so it's not razor sharp. There's a little bit of a roundness at that edge. And that's what I'm using now to essentially sand away the rough areas that were created with the X-Acto knife. And just when you'd thought you'd seen all the tricks, hang on, we've got one more. This is a plain old-fashioned stainless steel spoon. Make sure it's not silver. It has to be stainless steel. I'm rubbing it right now very vigorously on my pant leg to get it good and clean. And then I'm burnishing the paper. You don't have to push down too hard, but I'm pushing down on the paper. Again, let me look at that in the light and see if it is as smooth as I want. Yep, just about. So this levels off the paper and makes it almost as smooth as it was before I abused it dreadfully. Remember, first I scratched it with an X-Acto knife, then I painted, then I scratched it some more, then I used sandpaper to get rid of the scratchings, then I used a spoon to get rid of the sandpaper. Does that make sense? So now the paper is pretty good. Those are some really important tricks if you want to do some watercolor painting. Now, I'm breaking out my gouache watercolor kit. I could use white gouache on a piece of paper. It would work just fine, but if I do that, then any gouache, white gouache that I end up not using will get wasted. You can see right there where my finger's pointing. Actually, you can't see. There's little piles of already dried gouache, so they can be used again in the future. But for a job like this, I really prefer to have a fresh daub of brand new white gouache to do some touch-up on this watercolor painting. Now, you understand, I'm sure, that as soon as I touch one little bit of opaque watercolor gouache to this painting, then it is no longer I'm using the term facetiously, it's no longer a legal watercolor painting. That is to say, I could not get into oil painters for America. Well, that goes without saying. I'm deeply confused if I'm trying to get into OPA with a watercolor painting. No, I can't get into Watercolor Society of America. And again, that's not my goal, so it doesn't matter. But up until this moment, right here, everything that I've been doing has been tried and true, old-fashioned, legal, and again, I'm doing air quotes with my fingers when I say the word legal there. Everything I've been doing up until this point is all transparent medium, so it's a quote-unquote legal watercolor. But as soon as I put my first drop of opaque gouache, and that it is not. Now, yesterday when I was doing this painting, I already explained why I decided to go ahead and use opaque medium on this painting. First of all, of course, I'm not planning to enter Watercolor Society of America with this painting. More importantly, I'm doing this painting for beautiful Harper Ray, the bride that I'm doing the painting for. And she's probably not an artist. If she is, she probably doesn't know the rules about Watercolor Society of America. I think I'm being facetious here, but I think it's a pretty safe bet she doesn't. Thirdly, I'm going to camouflage even the gouache. You understand the word gouache is opaque watercolor, right? I'm going to camouflage this white gouache so that the unskilled eye won't even be able to tell, won't even be able to discern that I've used some opaque. And of course it wouldn't matter to them anyway. But it really is an easy way to get just the texture and sparkle that I want on this dress. So I've got one more little trick I want to show you before I finish up this broadcast. And in order to do that, I need to make sure that the gouache that I just put down is thoroughly dry. So I've picked up my hairdryer here, and I'm taking just a minute to make sure it's dry. And here's that trick. It's our old friend, Mr. Sandman. Yes, and I am sanding down the little bumps of gouache. The white paint that I just put down, I'm flattening it out. It still is opaque. It still reads as perfectly white, but I'm just simply taking the bumps off it so that it's fairly well disguised. Again, only an understanding eye would even be able to discern at all that I used white gouache. Let me point out here that the other white spots that are scattered across her dress were created with a liquid mask at the very beginning of the painting process. So the white dots, if I can use that term, the white dots that are on her dress are made in two different ways. One is a liquid mask used at the very beginning of the painting process, and the other here is, as you've seen, the white gouache applied at the very end. So again, even a very trained eye would be required to even to discern the difference. So that's my finished watercolor painting, and I used a big brush there to get rid of all the dust, and I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Once again, why the glove? The glove is to protect the paper from the oil in my hand. So there's the photograph and the painting side by side. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you benefited from some of those tips and tricks. Please leave your comments below, and please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I look forward to being back again with you really soon.